transparente.
So thank you again for being here and for reporting on this. The San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, just by way of quick background, we are a water importer. We provide water. We are a source of water for communities here in the San Gabriel Valley, specifically cities of Alhambra, Azusa, Monterey Park, and Sierra Madre. We're a state water contractor, and we serve about 200,000 people in these four cities and are part of a kind of shared governance structure that helps to manage water resources here in the San Gabriel Valley. And a few of our one of our main partners, the Main San Gabriel Basin Water Master, is here today as well to talk about water conditions. And we'll go to the next slide. This is our board, real quick. Privileged and honored to be able to serve as the president of the board for the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, alongside four other highly esteemed board members that manage and lead the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. Our staff, Darren Casamoto and Ed Hills, lead the staff of the district. And our headquarters is based in Azusa, but we cover Alhambra, Monterey Park, again, Sierra Madre, and Azusa. Next slide. We're a state water contract, one of 29 that helped to build the state water project that moves water from Northern California down to Southern California. And these are just pictures of the project to give you a sense of our infrastructure and the infrastructure that we share in the management of. The next slide. Just real quick, the state water project brings water from Northern California again down to Southern California. And then our infrastructure, our pipeline in the San Gabriel Valley actually begins in the Inland Empire in San Bernardino. We move water from the state water project into our pipeline, goes about 40 miles from San Bernardino to Azusa. And you can kind of see it here, kind of parallels the 210 freeway in much of the San Gabriel Valley, and moves thousands of acre feet of water, usually every year. This year, with our allocation, a lot less water than usual, just because it hasn't rained and snowed as much in Northern California, which is the source of our water. We just don't have as much water to be able to move and bring down to Southern California, to the San Gabriel Valley, for our residents and our businesses to be able to use. These are just some pictures, and those are just some pictures of our infrastructure as well. And we're supporting it as we started to experience drought conditions, and with the pandemic as well, in the economic impacts over the last year and a half, started to reach out and engage our cities on how we could provide support for infrastructure investments, but also provide support for residents and businesses. In addition to our kind of primary mission of importing and moving water from Northern California down to here in the San Gabriel Valley, we've continued to offer technical assistance and consultation for our cities and the water utilities, the retailers that provide water directly to residents and businesses. And we've provided millions of dollars in grants and zero interest financing and loans to help ensure infrastructure investments continue to be made over the last year and a half, despite economic and health in the pandemic conditions that have been front of mind and top of kind of our policy issues in our community, to continue making sure that these investments are made. So things like water treatment facilities and investments in reservoirs and wells and pipelines locally, and infrastructure replacements, continue to engaging schools and students and teachers on programs on water and environment related topics. Continue to expand technology with change outs of meters to smarter meters, continuing to fund and support and direct water conservation projects and programs, and continue to engage the community. And we're looking forward to, as the state continues to reopen, as we're officially reopened, but as people start to get out to community events, and as those are hosted in person, we'll continue and look forward to engaging with residents and businesses in person once again, as the fall approaches and as the summer arrives, as well as peak kind of water use typically occurs during the summer months. And so as we enter into kind of summer and peak water use and also peak dry and heat periods, would love your assistance as members of the media to help get the message out around water conditions, drought conditions that are existing here in San Gabriel Valley, and to encourage water conservation from residents and businesses as we head into peak kind of summer months and into the fall. And we don't know whether what the weather conditions and how wet or not it will be in the fall. And so as we experience drought conditions now, want to encourage people to save water and to think through kind of our daily lives where we can do that and where it makes sense to cut back on some water use and be a little bit more water, thinking more proactively around our water use. Not sure if there's another slide coming up, but I don't remember. No, so just quickly, as Director Prince mentioned as well, I think this water district, the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, is about 66 years old now. Started in 1959, voted in existence by voters, and we've over the decades built out infrastructure and found ways to support the cities and our communities in making sure that there is enough water as the population grows to meet our needs. We're proud of that tradition and that history, and proud to be able and honored to be able to continue fulfilling that mission in the future, and looking forward to ways that we can continue to invest in our communities and our infrastructure to make sure that there is enough water going forward as we continue to experience drought and climate change impacts the water that's available for our communities, that we will be able to meet those needs and continue to meet those needs in a resilient and affordable way going into the future. Next slide. And I'll kind of end it there and pass it on to Darren Cosimoto, our general manager, to go over existing drought conditions here in the San Gabriel Valley and kind of in the region. But thank you again to the members of the media for taking time today to help to inform your audiences. Appreciate your work on that, and happy to take questions at the end after the presentations on this. And I'll hand it over to Darren. Thanks so much.
So this provides a useful visual of the situation. The first picture you see here is San Gabriel Reservoir. If you drive up Highway 39 into the mountains, there are 3 reservoirs along the road. San Gabriel Reservoir would be the second reservoir that you would hit driving up the highway. It's the largest reservoir in the system. Typically this time of year, the reservoir would be full or near full and making releases for water replenishment down the San Gabriel River to various facilities. You can see here the picture that the reservoir is pretty close to being dry. If we could go back to the previous slide. The second picture you see is actually up in Northern California. That's Lake Oroville. And you may be asking why that's relevant to our situation down here. Well, 20% of the water used in the San Gabriel Basin is actually imported from out of the area. And the biggest portion of that imported water comes from the State Water Project. And Lake Oroville is one of the most important reservoirs on the State Water Project. And you can see here, again, the water level is extremely low. Next slide, please. So drought is common. Drought means just a shortage of rain over a long period of time. It is important to note that California being such a large state, it's not uncommon to have dry conditions in the north and wet conditions in the south, or vice versa. But this year we happen to have the worst of both worlds. We have dry conditions both up north and down south. So you can see here the statistics. We've had 5 droughts over the last 50 years. On average, 8 out of 10 years are below normal. And it's important to know here, like I said, in the main San Gabriel Basin, we don't provide enough local water to fully sustain ourselves. So again, we rely on about 20% of the water coming from outside of the area. And the important thing to know is droughts are slow in arriving, but also slow in disappearing. So you usually can't recover from a drought, even if you have one exceptional year. It usually takes a series of wet years to get out of a drought. Next slide, please. So this again is the second consecutive dry year we've had. kind of the chronology of it. In April, the governor issued a drought proclamation statewide. Later in April, he declared emergency conditions in 2 counties throughout the state. And then again in April, the State Water Project, which again I referenced, provides about 20% of our water down here in the basin. Our allocation was actually reduced from 10% to 5%. And to put those numbers in perspective, for us to meet our obligations to the basin, it typically takes about a 50 to 60% allocation on the State Water Project for us to be able to deliver the water necessary. So us being down at 5%, you can see how critical the situation is. And then in May of 2021, the governor extended the drought emergency to 41 of 58 counties throughout the state. And now municipalities are now implementing water use restrictions. Throughout San Gabriel Basin, our rainfall varies from year to year. A normal year is about 18.55 inches per year. You rarely ever get a normal year. You see extremes here. So going back over the last 6 years, you see 53%, 120%, 43%. You hardly ever get a normal year. It's extremes that bounce back and forth. And in extremely wet years, unfortunately, we can't capture all of the water that's provided. So sometimes in wet years, we have too much water that we can't utilize it all. So we can't make up for the dry years. And you can see kind of it's been back and forth, one dry year followed by a wet year and so on. But again, these past 2 years have both been below average. That kind of puts us in the position that we're in now. Next slide, please. And this is just kind of statewide conditions on the graphic. The darker the color, the more severe the drought. So you can see beginning in 2012, we went through kind of a 5-year period of low water rainfall and drought conditions. And then we kind of normalized back from 2017 to 2019. Things kind of got back to normal. And then again, you can see then the next 2 years brought us back to the same condition. So that's kind of where we are now. You can see most of the state is in darker red shades, which means the majority of state is in extreme drought conditions. Next, please. And this is a blow up of our current situation. So you can see the extremely dark red is exceptional drought. Most of the state is in extreme drought. You can see our snowfall, our snowpack is non-existent. For this time of year, we're at 0% of normal. And you can see our reservoir levels at about 67% of what they normally would be this time of year. Next, please. And this again is our state water project allocations. And you can see they bounce around quite a bit. But again, the key thing to note is we need about 50 to 60% to maintain our obligations to the basin. So you can see in the last 6 years, there's been more dry years than wet years. And again, it kind of compounds on itself. A 20% allocation last year, followed by a 5% allocation this year. No matter how much water we had in storage, there's nothing we could do that could sustain us through 2 consecutive allocations of 20% or less. So again, that puts us in the state we are in now. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tony Zampiello. He's the executive officer of the main San Gabriel Basin. And he kind of discussed here, most of the basin utilizes groundwater And Water Master oversees groundwater replenishment and pumping. So I'll turn it over to Tony at this point.
Thank you, Darren. Good morning. I want to thank the president, Darren, and the staff for the district for including us in this. Water Master's been a part of this briefing for quite a few years. The big difference in the last 2 years is that we normally get a lunch. I was expecting Grubhub to show up, but it never did, Darren. So I guess you owe me a grilled cheese sandwich or something. But, you know, the agency I work for, we actually try to manage best we can what's happening in the basin as far as groundwater levels and keeping the supply up. And so Darren and others have said quite a few times this morning that we depend on 80% of our water from that to come out of the local mountains and be spread locally. And, you know, typically, if you look at the long-term average of water we've been able to put in the ground, it's typically about 100 to 110,000 acre feet that we're able to spread. Now, during this drought, this dry period that I consider to be the last 12 to 14 years, we've averaged at one point over 5 years less than 100,000. So what that means is that we draw on the bank. There's a little cartoon there of what the basin looks like, and so you know, I think it's very fair to say in our area that we're in drought or even dry conditions, because when we have a good year of deliveries, we're still, you know, in the last few years, we've been recovering from dry conditions. Next slide, please. So this is the area we cover. The blue area represents the relevant watershed, and it does include those reservoirs that Darren talked about way up at the top. And you know, I think the simplest way to look at the basin, it's not quite 50-50, but the 605 freeway kind of splits it right down the middle. You've got the border with Laverne on the far east side. You've got South Pasadena on the west side, and then the cities that the only city that is outside of the basin, in a sense, is city of Sierra Madre, of the 4 cities that the district serves. So next slide. So we talk a lot about what, you know, early on we have what we called an initial operating plan, and that's the judgment. The judgment was entered into over a water dispute that started before 1974, turned into a stipulated judgment, which meant all the parties agreed to take a document that was a plan to the court on how they would operate the basin, and they all signed on to that. What that did is it did a lot of things, but the 2 main things that it established is it established anybody pumping prior to that judgment that ended up a party of that judgment to be a percentage of the total water rights pumped out of the basin. And then when the folks put that together, they knew at the time the dispute arose because there was actually more pumping going on than the natural conditions in the mountains could support. And so in the judgment is what's called the physical solution. And that's where the San Gabriel district comes into play. They're one of 3 agencies, depending on where the pumping is happening, that Water Master orders at the end of the year their replacement water from, that's been pumped above what's considered our operating safe yield. Now, the operating safe yield is put together, is acted on by the board each year in May, and it's based on a report that the engineer puts together. And we've had the operating safe yield set very low for the last 6 years at 150,000 acre feet. So what that means is if we pump 200,000 acre feet out of the basin, Water Master could be potentially looking for up to 50, maybe even 55,000 acre feet based on recent numbers to go to the districts like Darren's and the boards and and order that water. Now, when their allocation is set so low, it's very difficult to do that unless they have water and storage in the basin. As I said, there are no limits on pumping. Folks can pump as much as they want, but they are responsible to have to replace that water. And we have to replace it. Every acre foot that's pumped, we have to put an acre foot back in. Next slide. So we have one main well in the basin. It's the Baldwin Park Key Well. It's referred to that, or just the Key Well. The measurement is above mean sea level, so that it's less of a reference from where the ground is down to the water, but actually where the water actually exists, and that's the benchmark that we go from. So as of June 11th this year, we're at 192.4 acre feet, feet above mean sea level. That's about 12 feet lower than we were last year. The 1 foot in the basin equals 8,000 acre feet. So you can see, to make up 12, that's quite a bit of water that we need to make up. The historic low, however, was 169.4 in November of 2018. So we're still not to our historic low, but we certainly need all the water we can, because we are always in recent years, we've always been in a cycle. I kind of refer to it very similar to wildfires, where you have the fire come through, and then the area there that's affected is in a period of recovery for some years after that. Well, that's the way the basin works. The basin's kind of a shock absorber. We can pull out of the bank, but we need to make some deposits sooner or later. Darren covered the rainfall. We're about 35% of average, which is not good. We're already beyond what we consider the rainy season here locally. And he also mentioned that the average is about 18.5. But under these conditions, we'd certainly be looking at more than that to start to have some real substantial recovery. Next slide, please. So this is that, I talked about that key well. This is a chart that shows the historic patterns in that key well. So really, even though we had, in 2011, 2012, we had some substantial recovery in the basin. That had more to do with us putting some programs in place, seeing a huge reduction in production throughout the basin, and there were a couple of above average years in there. But really, I go back and look to where you see the in around 07, and I consider that to be really where we started to see a decline, because you see that even at the peaks, they didn't necessarily recover. A little bit about this chart: the green area is the top of the operating range that we try to stay in as part of the judgment. The red line is the bottom of the operating range. So when we had that low, as you can see, we kind of dipped below where we wanted to be, ideally in that operating range. And then the other thing to point out is that because the reason there are two lines is, one is the black line that would show where we actually would be had we not cooperated with all of the parties in the basin to bring in some additional water and store it. And actually, we worked out with Metropolitan Water District through one of the other member agencies to bring in a substantial amount of water, 100,000 acre feet, and finance that water over time. Next slide. So these are just kind of graphic depictions of what Darren has been describing and what I've been saying. So you've got the 18, the red line is the 18.5 for our average, where we're long-term average with rainfall. And then at the far right of this, the scale, it shows by year where we came in with the actual rain. So really going back to, like I say, about beyond from 06 on, we really never saw those gigantic storms like we had in 2005. And Darren did mention, some of you may remember that in 2005, that winter, the river actually went into flood control mode. So we were capturing a bunch of water, but at some point when the dams reach their maximum capacity, they go into spillway, and we did lose some of that water to the ocean, but we were able to put about 300,000 acre feet in the basin that year. Next slide. And so this one is an interesting one that we've seen this kind of pattern start to develop also since 2006, where it's really become evident. The only way we can capture the water is actually for it to come down in the watershed, run off, and be either captured in the river or on non-permeable, permeable surfaces and other areas throughout the valley. And what we've seen in recent years is that even when we get the wet years, because the watershed gets so dry, we don't really get the level of runoff that we used to. So, years ago, when we would have 2 or 3 inches in the canyon as a storm, it was so predictable that I could have told you how much we would anticipate actually running down into Morris and San Gabriel reservoirs. And I could be pretty close, but in this last period of time, what we've seen is they're not in relation as much as they used to be. So we may get a good storm, but if the watershed has been dry for a longer period, we may not see that in water that we can store and spread. Next slide, please. This kind of lays everything, overlays everything that in the previous slide. So you've got the key well is the green line. And as you would think intuitively, the peaks in the key well kind of follow those wet years. And so that means that we do gain some into the savings account, into the reservoir, into the groundwater basin. And then the biggest difference between this is when you look at the, hold on, because I've got faces here. When you look at the supplemental water, it's supplemental and local runoff. So as I said before, under some of the contracts that we had with Metropolitan, you can see that the red area is up there. That's water that we actually have to physically pay cash to someone for. And the blue line, even though there are licenses and other things that we pay to spread that water, it's much, much cheaper. And it's really what our operations have been based on all these years. Next slide. So the last thing I wanted to talk just a little bit about is something that we have worked with San Gabriel District and other partners on, is we've gone into expanding our public outreach. And this isn't necessarily so much a conservation program as it is what we're trying to do is educate folks on actually how the basin works. One of the things that we struggle through, Darren made it very clear that, there's the northern part of the state, and there are the supply conditions up there, and there's our area, which relies heavily on groundwater. And so a lot of times if you have one really wet year or heavy snowpack in Northern California, those surface reservoirs can recover a lot faster than the groundwater basins. And some of the bigger the bigger local channels that cover the entire area of the Southern California will a lot of times report that we're out of the woods or the drought is over, when really we aren't locally. So what this campaign, the Waters That Connect Us, the goal on that is to expand on what the San Gabriel district is talking to you all about an offering for conservation, but also trying to get folks to better understand how the basin works. So we initially put together a group of producers, the folks that actually deliver water to the users in the basin, refine the program, put together a new separate website and some materials that all of the partners can use. And then through e-blasts and social media, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube videos, we've been trying to explain exactly how the storage in the canyons works, how we take water into the basin, and better educate people, hopefully, that they really need to listen to the local focused conditions as well as what's happening throughout the state. And so it was very interesting when we had some of the focus groups that we put together, how people really, their understanding of how the system worked really isn't how the system works. So I think we've made some headway there. We're partnering with the districts to try and expand some of the curriculum that they provide to their local schools, to include some of the groundwater, some education on how the groundwater works and how we rely so heavily on local wells. And I think that's it. So thank you again.
Thank you, Tony. For the next section, I'm going to be discussing what our water conservation and community outreach programs are here at the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District. So we have a robust program within the district. We have a variety of things. We provide support to our member cities, educational resources for schools. We have a rebate program where residents can get financial incentives if they upgrade to water saving appliances. We have our H2L outreach program and speaker bureau programs where we go out to the communities and do various events to teach the community about water savings. We have an OWL grant community program, which is a grant that offers school educational groups or nonprofits up to $2,000. We've had several pilot projects that we've done throughout our 4 member cities. This year, we've been focusing on doing work within our website, our brochure, creating kid videos and content, doing new informational guides that could be accessed online, or we work with our local libraries and schools. And we also have what we call our San Gabriel Valley Water Forum, in which we work with the 5 water agencies in the basin to have a forum to educate the public about water. For 2021, our awareness campaign for the summer is Saving Water. It's a good thing. We're in the process of creating banners and bus shelters and putting them in our service territory. So you should see this one in Monterey Park soon, which has been translated into English, Chinese, and Spanish. As I had mentioned, we have a rebate program to incentivize residents and businesses to change out their washing machines, toilets, rain barrels, irrigation controllers. For businesses, we also do a waterless urinal rebate. We have promotional rates that are going to expire on June 30th, where we increased our washing machine rebates and our rain barrel rebates. Due to the pandemic, we were constrained on our access to the students in person. We typically have in-person assemblies at every single public elementary school in our district. So we created educational videos and a growth chart and activities to be able to do the outreach remotely. I had mentioned our OWL, our program, our Opportunities for Water Leadership Community Grant Program, and where we give $2,000 to nonprofits and school groups to be able to have do water projects. This is a list of the various organizations and schools that have taken advantage of our program. And then this showcases the 5 partners that we work with in doing our San Gabriel Valley Water Forum. We had to cancel our last forum, but we hope in 2022 we'll be able to resume in person. And NBC4 has always been a partner for this event. And then I also wanted to touch base a little bit about what we've been doing in Alhambra and Monterey Park for fiscal year 2020 and 2021. In the city of Alhambra, we've provided a grant for $200,000 for low-income water bill assistance program. A lot of residents have been affected by the pandemic and had accounts where they were past due for more than 90 days. So the board of directors granted this grant to the city of Alhambra. And in early 2020, we also provided a $50,000 grant that was utilized to fund water efficient landscaping projects in the city of Alhambra. In the city of Monterey Park, we provided a 0 interest loan of up to $4 million for their new PFAS, PFOA water quality and water treatment project. The city of Monterey Park has some water quality issues that they need to address. So this loan will assist them to pay for the water treatment project. We've also provided a $150,000 grant for low-income water bill assistance program. Like Alhambra, they also have several accounts that have been past due for over 90 days. So the $150,000 will be able to assist them, the residents. And then we also provided a $50,000 grant for water-related projects, and the city utilized it to update to waterless urinals and water-saving toilets throughout the city. And with that, I want to open it up to questions and answers. Albert Liu from the district, he just shared in the chat the PowerPoint. So if you need access to it, you can go ahead and download it there. But we also wanted to see if anybody had any questions. If you do, if you could please raise your hand and I can unmute you, or you can type in your question in the chat box.
So there's a question from Kelly. Are there any new sustainable water projects on the horizon for the San Gabriel Valley? And Tony can touch on this too, but I'll just mention we are looking at developing additional sources of supply that can and will eventually provide service to the San Gabriel Basin, including a project that the Metropolitan Water District of Southern California is in the not even early stages, but is developing to recycle a significant amount of water and potentially bring that in to the San Gabriel Valley to put in the ground for the communities to use. That project is ongoing and could kind of break ground in the next few years as design moves forward. And I think Tony and others can detail that a little bit more if there's interest. We are looking at additional opportunities for stormwater capture. Those are, I think, relatively limited here in the San Gabriel Valley. Much of the rest of the LA region, there's probably more promising opportunities for more stormwater capture. I think we already do actually a very good job in terms of capturing most flows when the rains do occur in the San Gabriel Valley. Most of that is captured in the San Gabriel River and the basin, and does percolate down in the groundwater basin, and it is captured kind of in the mountains as well. And as we detailed earlier, there's a series of dams that capture a lot of the runoff from rains and snow when it melts. In the mountains, we're just not, the environment is just so dry and has been dry for so long that much of that water just gets absorbed into the soils and doesn't really percolate into the behind the dams and get captured enough. And so you can build as many stormwater capture projects as you want. If it doesn't rain, it doesn't work as well. So we ultimately need the rain to come back. And until that happens, we need people to continue to conserve and to make that, more permanent way of life. And a lot of that is, we are supporting that in other water issues as well, through rebate programs for more permanent water savings, like changing out appliances and installing new technologies that will allow for and support more permanent water savings and water use efficiency going forward. And I know the cities are looking at ways to also make that more permanent and other opportunities to do that. And we're working to partner on that. And looking at other opportunities to bring in additional sources of supply going into the future. But none of those will come into play in the next few years. And we don't know how long this drought will last, but we know that the drought conditions are already here, and that we've been experiencing dry years for at least 2 years now. And as Toby and others have already mentioned, when you look back further 10, 15, 20 years, it's actually been very dry for most of those years, with a few wet years. So just want to make sure that that perspective is understood, and that those are the facts in terms of just our region is experiencing drier and drier conditions more and more regularly. And so we can't count on kind of rain necessarily just coming in to save us, and that drought conditions are going to be kind of an outlier. They're actually happening more often than not, and we need to be more and more prepared for that. So we're looking at developing additional source supply and resiliency into our water systems to meet that need.
I have another question. They would ask if it's possible to restrict water use again in the near future if this drought situation continues.
Yeah, I would say the state has declared a drought emergency for much of California, although not much of that is extended into Southern California. Others can chime in here, but I would expect if this fall is dry or relatively dry again, we will likely see statewide, if not regional, mandatory restrictions start to be talked about seriously. So at this time, I'll reiterate, at this time, no one is calling for mandatory water use restrictions in Southern California and the San Gabriel Valley. We are calling today for the media and others to get the word out about voluntary measures and voluntary actions people can take to just be a little bit more mindful about water use on a day-to-day basis, and to cut back where it makes sense and where it's comfortable. But probably if it's dry the rest of this year, if we don't have a very wet winter going into the next water year, we will likely, very, very likely see statewide and regional mandatory water use restrictions come back into the fold. Evelyn, you had a question. Is the water supply in SUE different than that in other parts of LA County? Some of the conditions in the San Gabriel Valley, right? Just we got the San Gabriel Mountains where we capture a lot of rainwater. So our systems are a little bit different, but a lot of the precipitation kind of conditions exist throughout LA County, right? There aren't necessarily borders in terms of differences in precipitation from one part of LA to another. But the ability for different geographic areas in the county and in the region allow for more stormwater capture or not, and different groundwater conditions, and whether people are able to draw on that or use that as a resource are different in different parts of LA. So there are differences, but we experience kind of the same rain patterns and stuff. Florence has a question in here. How often will drought occur? And are we better prepared this drought compared to the last drought? As I think we've all kind of said today already, drought conditions and years of dry periods, dry years are occurring more and occur much more often than wet years. And so I think this is going to be a much more regular occurrence looking forward. And it certainly has been our experience the last decade or so. And I think Tony mentioned the last 15 years or so, a lot more dry years than wet years. And so we have to be prepared that this is likely going to be what the future looks like for us. And so we're going to experience a lot more dry conditions, and that's just the reality. And so what do we need to do to prepare for that as a reality? I would say we're better prepared for the drought. I think we've taken serious actions as a state and as a region and in the San Gabriel Valley to help to prepare people for drought conditions, prepare our systems and our water utilities to weather drought. And we've done what we can to store up water. The challenge is that the drought conditions and kind of deeper and longer droughts are occurring and seemingly occurring more often than they have before. And so there's just not enough time to really truly recover and build up enough water reserves and have time to build up the infrastructure we need to be more prepared. So I think we're better prepared, certainly. And I think we've gone through kind of exercises in the last historic drought that ended in 2016, 2017, where we learned a lot of lessons and are implementing some of these measures for data collection and monitoring water usage and implementing kind of solutions. But a lot of the building out water sources and recycling water and stormwater capture and water conservation, these are large projects that take many, many, many years to develop and to build and to get into operation. And so a lot of those things just aren't online yet and we aren't prepared for. And so there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, but we're, I think, in a better place than we were going into the 2012, 2016, 2017 drought. How much does pollution and contamination affect our water supply? Very much so. Our groundwater basin here in the San Gabriel Valley, the main San Gabriel Basin water basin has pollutants and was polluted over the decades by agriculture and aerospace and other kind of industries that existed and still exist in some areas of the San Gabriel Valley. There's another agency, the San Gabriel Basin Water Master, main San Gabriel Basin Water Quality Authority, that helps to monitor and works with the water utilities and water agencies in the San Gabriel Valley to monitor contaminants in the groundwater basin and to help to clean that up, to find the money to clean those contaminants up. So all of us in the San Gabriel Valley are actively monitoring, proactively working to clean up our groundwater supply. And all of that is clean in drinking water standards, meet drinking water standards and safe standards before it goes into the tap for residents and businesses to use when we call on it. And any worries for COVID-19 in water? No, not worried at all about that. Existing treatment methods, chlorination and other treatment methods that are regularly employed to make sure that tap water that goes to residents and businesses every day is free of viruses and bacteria that are harmful to human health. Those have been proven effective against COVID-19 as well. We haven't seen any cases linked to tap water in terms of COVID-19 and transmission. The tap water is absolutely safe to drink, and encourage everyone to make sure that we dispel that myth and those misunderstandings of the water system. That is not an issue at all. And from everything I've seen, I don't think anyone has gotten any indication that that's a worry at all. And there's every reason, no reason not to trust, and every reason to trust the water system, the tap water system here in the San Gabriel Valley to deliver clean and healthy water for everyone who wants it and is able to access it. I don't know if Tony or if everyone wants to unmute Tony or anyone else has any thoughts on some of these questions. And Tony's sending a note. Water Master does a lot of monitoring and characterization of water quality. So I would just say and reiterate to close today, appreciation to the media for tuning in and for paying attention to this critical issue in terms of drought conditions that are back and that we are experiencing here in the San Gabriel Valley. Appreciate your assistance in getting the word out to to people here in the San Gabriel Valley about our drought conditions and the need to conserve, and look forward to continuing that engagement in the months to come, especially as we head into kind of deeper into the summer. There are tips on water savings, I think, on our website for both the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District and Water Masters, Waters That Connect Us website for water savings, and we'll, I think, distribute those afterwards as well. But I also reiterate the point, the San Gabriel Valley Municipal Water District, the Water Master, and other water agencies and utilities throughout the San Gabriel Valley are actively working to make sure there is enough water, and we have no worries about having enough water to meet the needs of our residents. But we're asking residents and businesses to conserve so that existing water supplies last as long as possible, and we can stretch those as long as possible, because we don't know how long a drought will last. And so we want to make sure that we're making the best use of our existing water resources, and to make sure that, and calling on residents and businesses in the San Gabriel Valley to take simple actions to just reduce water use as the summer approaches. So thank you all so much. Not sure if anyone else has any quick closing comments. If not, or if any final questions, happy to answer those. And Evelyn and our staff will be sending out a press release following this. Happy to have any follow-up conversations and interviews one-on-one. We can set those up. Just feel free to reach out to Florence or Evelyn, and we can set up times and dates for that if so desired. Again, thank you so much. The contact information for Darren and Tony, Evelyn, and Florence are on the screen now, and I think those slides have been linked for anyone to download if they want to use those for B-roll, or if you want to reach out, have any further questions, again, feel free to, please do reach out, and we're happy to set those conversations up. Thanks so much for your time, everyone. Have a happy Tuesday, and hope everyone has a good rest of the week. Thanks so much.
Thank you. See you.